Hey guys, it's Miss Leone here, and today we're going to be drawing a basic still life using observational drawing techniques in order to create the illusion of space along with shading. The materials we need for this assignment are a ruler, a pencil, a blank piece of paper, and I have my reference images that we're going to work from, okay? So just a few things to remember. So step one, when we're drawing from observation or drawing anything, we want to first make a basic line drawing, contour line drawing of the objects or whatever the subject is. Next, step two would be to identify the light source. And then step three would be to start adding shading. All right, so let's get started. So I'm just going to push this to the side. So for today's activity, I'm going to take a normal size piece of paper and I'm just going to fold it in half because we only need half for this assignment. We're only drawing 4 objects, so it doesn't make sense to use a whole paper. It's just more about the learning experience. All right. So we have this and this, and I'm going to push this up a little more. Okay, there we go. That way we can see both at the same time. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do is create these quadrants. We're going to split this piece of paper in half. So let's do that. So what you can do, you can measure. So this is 8.5 across, so 8.5 across divided by 2 is 4 1/4. So that's going to be right around there. Okay, and I'll show you what to do if you don't have a ruler to measure precisely. We just want to make sure that we're making a vertical line, not too dark. I'm making it darker in mine, that way you can actually see it, but in yours it should be lighter. Now what you can also do, so I showed you one way with the ruler to measure. Another thing you can do is if you take a paper that's the same size, you fold it in half, you're going to see that that half is where I measured my ruler with my ruler, so that's a trick. And then if you wanted to do the other opposite direction, I would just fold this half down and then I have my other measurement. So just make sure that you're folding straight so it's actually accurate. So I'm going to do that on both sides. So I showed you measuring and I showed you folding a paper. Alright, so now I'm just going to connect those two lines. Just make sure it's straight. Notice how I took a little second there. I really want to make sure I'm double checking. So for me it's kind of working out because I have this above me, but I think it's going to really help for you guys to figure out where things are going. Alright, so we're going to start by step 1, doing our line drawing. So we're going to use our observational drawing techniques that we did in the lesson before this. So remember, we're figuring out the proportion of the objects. That's how they relate to each other in size is compared to the whole. So is this half the size of this? How tall is this compared to that? How wide is it? What quadrant is it falling in? It should be matching and have the same amount of negative space around it. Okay, so along with looking at the size and comparing it, we're also going to see about the negative space. We're going to look at the shapes the negative space creates. We're going to look to see where is this cube lining up with the sphere, where is the cylinder lining up with the sphere, where is the cone lining up with the cube. Okay, we're also going to be paying attention to hierarchy and overlapping, so the objects that are closest are going to be slightly lower than the objects that are behind it, and so on and so forth. Alright, so to begin, we are going to first start sketching our sphere, which of course, here we go with another circle. If you guys know me, you know that that's my favorite. Not, but yeah. So let's do this. So I'm focusing on this side right now. I'm not looking at these objects, so I'm looking to see where does this line up. So I can tell, so if I was going to split my drawing in half, right here, right, so I like to do this. I'm splitting it in half this way, and then again, so I can see that this is slightly above, and it's kind of in between this section here, so I can tell that this is going to be about here. The top is going to be about here. See, it's kind of going over the line, and then this part of the sphere is kind of in between these two sections. So let's see, so if this is half, 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 I can tell that this is going to be more or less around here, okay? And then how low is it? So if I split this quadrant in half, right, I can see, and then half again just to see, I can see that this is kind of in between those two as well. So half, half again. So I already know, I'm kind of marking where I'm going to be putting this. And then once I do that, then I can go ahead and start drawing my circle. So I'm going to push this out of the way real quick because I need to draw my circle, and it's a little awkward drawing it straight up. So I always like to turn my page when I'm drawing. And I'm going to definitely adjust this because that's super crooked, right? So let me fix it before I start darkening it. So if it's a little lopsided, just kind of shave in while you're sketching to get it more accurate. So then I'm going to erase this extra. And erase anything extra here. Okay. And then just kind of fill it in again. Make sure that that's the way I want it. So circles are the trickiest shape to draw, I feel. Somehow we keep drawing them in every activity, so we should be improving, but it's still always a pain no matter what, and I'm the teacher. It's just still not my favorite, but we have to do it, and I'd rather you just like really practice doing it than tracing a circle, because that's the only way you're going to learn. Now, if you were doing like an architecture design or something, then you would be using like a compass. That's different. All right, so now let's double check. It's in the right position. You can see how it's relating, okay? And actually having this above is kind of helping me out to kind of see this. It is indeed falling there. All right, so the next form that we're going to do is the cylinder. So if I were to split this sphere in half, I can see that this cylinder starts kind of halfway between that half. So if I split it in half, this is kind of halfway. So I already know that this is coming out right here. Okay, and I'm going to draw it through very lightly. And then I can see how far out is it. So if I measured half and then half, I can see it's just to the right of that. So I could see it's just to the right of that. Just want to make sure that's nice and straight. Now I can adjust. I usually draw a little crooked at first somehow. All right, and then from there, how far up does it go? So now I have to kind of measure this quadrant. So I can see this, if I do half here and half here, just to kind of pre-do it. I can see if I cut across, it's kind of slightly lower than that halfway mark. So it's going to be slightly lower than the halfway mark. Okay, so I already know now, I've pre-marked it, so I'm going to just bring this line to that point. Now, the last thing I need to figure out before I finish this is how wide is this cylinder? Where is it lining up compared to that sphere? So again, if I split imaginary line in my sphere, I can see that this is just to the right of the half. So imaginary line just to the right. And then I know, and I feel like that's, yep, okay, just to the right of it. And I'm still sketching lightly because I'm just really trying to figure out this relationship. Okay, so I just kind of do this sometimes just to kind of see where things are lining up, and then I'm going to add my oval. And you can see that my lines are very soft because I'm still working it out. So if you just do a few layers of gentle lines, very sketchy, you're able to erase better. I'm just gonna, while I'm cleaning that up. So now, just to make sure, this is how, you don't have to do this, but if you're having issues, and I will be erasing these before we shade, you can see that technically, right, this sphere is overlapping that cylinder. So technically, that's where it would fall. But when we start shading, I'm going to get rid of that because this is solid. It's not made of glass, right? So that's going to also help me to make sure that it's in the right position and that it's the right proportion. All right, so now that we have that done, we're ready to move on to the cube. So I can tell automatically, which is great, that this cube is slightly behind the edge of this sphere. So slightly behind, right, the edge of the sphere. This is where the cube is going to be. So I'm not sure how high yet, but I'm going to just have this go down, and I can tell down here it's just a tiny bit of it, and it's actually, if we drew across, it's slightly lower than the cylinder. So let's double check that. Yep, slightly lower than the cylinder. Just making sure that it's straight. Okay, so then from there, this is the one I already know. So I'm just going to go like that wide, only because if this is a cube, I know that this has to be a rectangle even on all sides. So just knowing that, I kind of can guesstimate how far out it's going to go. I'll double check it before I finish it, but I already know, like, if this, you know, this is going to kind of be even. But how high now is this going to go? So if I already made my marks. If this is half and that's half of that half, I can see it's slightly above. So if this is half and this is half of that half, I can see that it's going to be slightly above it. So it gets easier the more that you practice. It's not a magic trick. Drawing from observation, drawing things accurately as you see them, is just like a visual math that we can train. Anybody can train their eye. All right, so I have that. Now let's see how wide I need to go, because I predict that it's going to be about here-ish, more or less, but let's double check now. So I have this quadrant. I'm going to split this line in half and in half again, and I can see it's almost in the middle but closer to the left one. So if I split this quadrant in half and in half again, I can see that it is slightly closer to this one, so that's about that. So let's see if we end up with a nice square. I feel like my bottom of my cube, of my square, is a little crooked, so I'm just going to straighten that out a little bit. Okay. Straightening it out. All right. So I'm comparing. This looks about the same. It's the thickness here, right? There's like a smaller rectangle, a longer one. This one's like a wider one. This one's a little bigger. So I'm just comparing. All right, so the only thing we're missing here in this cube is going to be that edge that's touching the other part of the sphere. So I'm just solidifying this a little bit. Doing it gently though, because when we start shading, our lines are going to become the shading. All right, so now here I'm going to be looking how far out does this go, and I'm comparing my negative space as well. Okay, so I would say, based on my negative space that I have, I feel like it's going to be around here. But let's see. So if this is half, yep, it's right around half of the half. But how tall is it? So if I know where that is, I'm just going to go like this with my pencil, it's kind of like at that angle. So I'm going to try to mimic that and then just join them. And actually where it's joining is about at the quarter mark. So, and then I'm going to just lightly draw behind just so we can see, we can envision. And because this is at eye level, this little corner is going to go up that way at the opposite angle. So if you remember going back to when we drew at different eye levels, right? If it's at your eye level, you only see the side of it. Okay, so next, finally, we are going to draw our cone. So I can see automatically the relationship between the corner of the cube. The cone starts about here. Looking down here, I'm looking, it's about around here. So I'm just kind of at this point, we can kind of eye it a little bit. And I know that this is going to curve up, but now how far out am I going to have it curving up, right? So what I've got to do first is I'm going to figure out my point. So if I have this point and I went straight down, I can see that it's kind of over here. And I can tell where it is in relation. It's going to have about that much empty space above it. So let's see how this works out. So I'm just going to lightly sketch that. Oh, pardon me. And then I can see, let's see, how far out. So if this is half again, I can see that this point is actually kind of in the middle of these two marks. So if this is half and this is half again, I can see that this point is again kind of in between those. So I need this to curve up and end up at that point. So I'm gonna just did a few sketchy lines there. That way I'm trying to get the shape. So what I'm also gonna do here to help me is I'm gonna draw this through here, okay? And just so I can kind of imagine what would this whole thing look like. I feel like the cone is maybe the trickiest thing here, because if you put this point off to the left or right too much, it's going to be wobbly looking, like crooked. The idea is that there should be symmetry if we split this right down the middle. Okay, so let's see what happens. And just when I connect. So here I feel like mine is a tad wobbly. So I'm just going to bring this side kind of over, and look, notice how I made some, like, a lot of little lines. I almost did like a shading there, but I just want to make sure that it's not lopsided. So from there, then I'll just erase the inner parts, and I'm going to adjust this. And I'm just going to double check, because this is the trickiest one. So I do recommend, if you didn't draw through them for the other ones, I would definitely do that for this one, just so we can see that relationship. Alright guys, and just make sure that the top of your cone is pointy. It's like a triangle, like an apex, it's meeting. Okay, and then just erase anything extra. Alright, so that was step one. And what I'm going to add as well, I'm going to add this little background line. You can tell it's like right above the back of the lower part of the cone. So more or less right around here, just to give it a sense of placement. Alright, so that was step one, to draw line drawing, contour line drawing of the original. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to first erase these marks and the objects that I see through, so now they'll become solid. So this is why we should always sketch lightly, because yes, you draw a lot of stuff to help you draw guidelines, but ultimately these lines will be disappearing. They're just to help artists figure it out and problem solve. positions, but then you can definitely get rid of them. So then what I'm going to also do at this point, I'm not going to get rid of it completely, but what I would like you to do is just gently erase. I still want to see it, but I don't want it to be so dark. So we're just going to gently erase these crosshairs, right? These quadrants, gently. I can still see it. I want to see it in your drawings because this is still the learning process, and I just want to see how accurate that you drew them compared to the quadrant lines. So I'm just going to lightly, not getting rid of them completely like I said, I'm just lightly lightening them gently. Alright, so now I'm just going to sketch back anything that I erased by accident in doing so. Make everything look up here more solid. Alrighty. Making sure that you really got rid of any of those extra pieces of the form, the objects, forms. Remember, form is 3D, shape is 2D, right? We have 3 rounded objects, right? We have the cylinder, the sphere, and the cone, and we have 1 flat object. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start to add shading. So before we can shade, step 2 is we're going to identify a light source. So I'm just going to put the light source, based on this, the light source is around here-ish, right? I'm going to do this really light because technically, again, just like we wouldn't see the quadrants in a drawing, we wouldn't see the light source. Technically, you would just make sure that the shading is on the same side everywhere. All right, so the first step for shading, now step 3, we're adding shading. What I want you to do is just make sure your pencil's really sharp, and we're going to be using the side of the pencil. So you can prime your pencil, make sure it's smooth. Sometimes when you sharpen it, it's like chipped a little or jagged. You want to make sure that it's going to be smooth. So look how wide I'm able to draw, shade, versus if I use the point. So we're not using the point, we're using the side. Alright, so let's begin by adding the lightest values first, and then we'll add the darker values. So knowing that the light source is there, we're just going to kind of do this little thing here. So it has a very light value here, white here, and then dark there. So I'm just going to go in and add the lightest values first where I see them to everything, and then I'll go in and build. So the idea is that you want these values to have gradation. So we're using the side of the pencil, but we're making sure we have smooth transitions. So white of the paper turning to light, turning to medium, turning to slightly darker. We want them to be gently transitioning, gradually. That's why it's gradation. All right. So then next, I can see here on this cube, so you really can't see much. I'll make it a little darker that way. I feel like the camera's not picking up. I'm just going to add very light, very, very light. And what I'm noticing here, if I was a righty, this would be fine. It's better if you, when you're adding shading, to keep your point of your pencil like inside the shape. If not, you're going to be erasing. Then here, I'm going to follow the shape of the form for this. I'm just going to gently, and look how quick we're able to do this with the side of the pencil. So this is why we're using this. It just enables us, this technique, to put value in a large area very quickly instead of using the point of your pencil. And then just, you can clean up as you do it. This is going to be darker. I'm still just going to put like a lightish value. I just want to designate on my first step, like, where are my light values going? And I don't want to see lines. This should be smooth. So I got a little outside, but what's great about using the side of the pencil, it's very forgiving. If you get outside, you can definitely erase it. Okay, and this little, let's not forget this little piece down here. Okay, and then we're going to go in once we're done and darken. Next, so the way the light is hitting this, we are going to very gently, I have like this circle happening here, around this center light source. So I'm just gonna start to add value, kind of following. I am following. It's like a C shape, but then up here there's a light value. So the idea is that this should be lightly turning into white. So if you get a little too dark, you can just tap, because we want it to look smooth. And then once we do the next layer, that's where we're really going to start to get our contrast. So I want this to gently, so I'm just going to tap here. I'm not going to smudge, I'm just going to be tapping. And I don't want you smudging with your fingers either, because I can tell. So don't do that. Sometimes also our fingers have grease on them or sweat, so you can like stain your paper. For learning purposes, I want you for this activity to not smudge with your finger. I want you to use light pressure to make light values, more pressure to make medium values, heavy pressure to make dark values. So I kind of have this mapped out where I'm going to have that. And then this one, I can see that there's like a value over here. I'm just trying to make it look nice and smooth. Okay, and then there's a light value here, so you can go vertical, or you can go this way and follow the shape of the form without making lines. To the best of your ability. Okay, and then here, I'm just gonna, alrighty. I'm gonna turn this a little bit because I can't get this angle. So I'm just gonna go like this. I'm just gonna add this light value where I see it, and then I'm gonna try to get it to transition into this white area. And this side too. I see when I did that other technique, I kind of made some lines, so I just want to smooth them out. I don't want to see lines in my shading. I'm really trying to have good control here. Alright, and then just clean up any edges. So now we've done the light values. Now we're going to go in and start building in the darker values, and then we're done. So here, this one's pretty easy. It's not that very dark there for much area, so I'm just going to kind of gently, softly, having it slowly transition. So I'm going to kind of build like a medium here now. You can see that that kind of goes down here. And I can see that this is a little on the whiter side. Okay. So I'm just going to add this. I didn't notice this before. So the great thing about this, so if you have this white edge of this cube, right, it should be touching a medium there. So you don't want any of the same exact values to touch each other. That's how you make contrast. So you'll see more as we move on. So this is going to be a little darker here. So just be careful if you have like eraser crumbs underneath. Sometimes when you're shading, you end up with like a mark. So I kind of have a mark here. Let me get rid of it. That could have been when I was measuring. Okay, so here we go. Alrighty. And then I'm just gonna, I have to tilt my page to get this little edge a little crispier. So, just to get it more defined, because notice how the lines on that side are completely gone. So I'm just gonna very gently, but I don't want it to look like a stripe. So now I have to, once I do that, it might look like a stripe at first. And you're just gonna really carefully soften it with less pressure and where it's overlapping the next value, very gently. Very, very gently. And then over here, I'm going to add a slight little something. And just make sure that you're keeping that pointy. Now let's see how that looks in comparison. Alright, not bad. And it's not that serious, so I feel like that's good enough right there. Okay, just making sure that you get to the edges, define the edges with your shading, so the lines become less prominent. Alright, next, so we already did the front of this cube, so we're good here. It's not really getting any darker there, but we are going to darken the side edge. So we're going to go in, applying more pressure, being careful to stay in the area. Alright, so I'm going to go like this. You can notice that the line is disappearing where that sphere is starting and this is ending. And I'm going to go in here. Oh, excuse me. Blew that away. Then I'm going to go here. Just kind of darken that. Making sure it's nice and crisp. Oh, I got outside the line there. That's okay. I'll fix it. Just be as neat as you can. And then down here, there's this little tiny, teeny weeny dark area. Okay, and then I'm going to crisp this up. And I think I'm going to do this. I have to turn my page here. Because just to get that, you want to have your edges look crisp. You don't want them to be blurry. And you're going to do that by just making sure when you're adding your final shading that your edges are crisp without having outlines. Okay? So that's the trick there. We've been doing this quite a lot, so I feel like this is it. We got this. Okay, and now next for the sphere. So I can see right away that this is darker up here, right here. So I'm just gonna, from that point out, I'm just gonna try to softly, okay, and then I'll fix that edge. I just want to have this transition softly into the medium, so notice how I'm just going back and forth and back and forth, ever so gently. So this is probably the trickiest one to shade. It's literally a circle, and we're making it three-dimensional by adding value. So I definitely want to make this a step darker than this cube. So right now it's very stripy, so I will be fixing that. Okay, and then up here is very subtle, nothing much up there, but this is our light source. So I'm just going to go back and forth right here. I just want to make this nice and smoothly changing values. Okay. Alright, and then I'm going to actually turn this so I can try to get that edge crisper, and then I'll come back in and soften that. But I can tell that this is dark. It's not super dark though. It's not black yet. Those cast shadows are going to be the black there. So we're not doing that yet. Okay. Alrighty. You always have like dark next to medium or dark next to light. So we have light, dark, light, medium, light, dark, light, medium. So it's all contrasting. All right, guys? So your drawing should look like mine. Remember to position each object in the proper quadrant. Don't erase your quadrants lines completely. I still want to kind of see them, so I take a good picture of it. And that's it, guys. So I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day. Bye.